I can. Okay. Hi, everybody. I am Dr. Jessi Sigander, and you have joined me for Dyslexic for a Day. And I am thrilled to have you here. Today, you are going to need a piece of paper and a writing utensil, so pen or pencil. So please make sure you have those close by. If not, go and grab those, and we will get started. Okay, so let me tell you a little bit about myself. My name is Dr. Jessi Sigander, and I am the owner and founder of the Brain Breakthrough. And the Brain Breakthrough is a therapy that approaches dyslexia and learning issues from a whole body point of view. So we want to know on a physiological level, why is it hard to read? Why are your eyes jumping all over the place? Why is comprehension a struggle? So that is a little bit about my background. Before that, the thing that really kicked me off into dyslexia is my daughter. I have a daughter who is 13 who was diagnosed with dyslexia when she was in second grade. My background's in education, and when she was diagnosed, I realized quickly I didn't know very much about dyslexia. And that kind of led me down this path and this passion to understand dyslexia, to help dyslexics, and to educate people about dyslexia. And so today we're going to spend just a few minutes talking about what dyslexia is, and then I'm going to give you some simulations that might help you understand a bit of what a dyslexic might experience in a classroom or in a situation where they're learning to read and write. Usually this is a super interactive thing, and so because we can interact back and forth, I am going to ask you from time to time to stop and write some comments into the chat box. It's important that we hear from each other and understand each other's experiences along the way. So let's get started. What is dyslexia? The International Dyslexia Association defines dyslexia as a specific learning disability that is a neurobiological in origin. It is characterized by difficulties with accurate and or fluent word recognition and by poor spelling and decoding abilities. Those are things we're going to look at today. These difficulties typically result from a deficit in the phonological component of language that is often unexpected in relation to other cognitive abilities, and the provision of effective classroom instruction. Secondary consequences may include problems in reading, comprehension, reduced reading experience that can impede growth of vocabulary and background knowledge. Dyslexia is not simply reversing letters and numbers. When we approached my daughter's second grade teacher, she said, "Oh, but she doesn't flip her letters." I said, "Yes, but something is still off." Dyslexia is not an intelligence problem. Brilliant people have dyslexia. It's not a matter of not trying enough or being lazy. Oftentimes we hear that from parents or from teachers, try harder. It's not because they're not trying. It's an issue that most teachers or schools don't usually help diagnose. And so depending on the state you're in, there's not a lot of schools that will do a lot of diagnosis for dyslexia for you. It's not something that you're going to grow out of. I hear that from a lot of teachers as well. Like, oh, they'll just get over it as they get older. And it's not uncommon. We estimate that 1 in 5 people have dyslexia. 68% of people in jail are dyslexics. It is a very common problem. It is an issue with phonological processing. It is an auditory, at the core of it, it's an auditory issue. So a dyslexic doesn't actually hear all the same sounds that you and I hear. It can be diagnosed as early as 4 years old. So there are some really common warning signs. So speech delay, stuttering, trouble kind of even putting really simple words together are usually some warning signs of dyslexia. There are many different types. There are 12 different types of dyslexia. And so dyslexia looks different from person to person. So you may be, I have some people that come see me that just struggle with math, right? Reading is just fine, but math is hard. That's a type of dyslexia. I have some people that have lots of different types of dyslexia. So it looks different from every person. And there's also a continuum. There's people that have, mild to moderate to severe dyslexia. And so oftentimes I hear parents or teachers say, well, I don't think they're dyslexic because da, 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 da. And it's just important to know that it can look really different from each person. Okay, so we're going to move through the simulation together. We're going to move through things one at a time. So we'll be on the screen for a little bit, and then I'll give you a warning. We'll move to the next screen. Your feedback, your response in the chat box is important. That's really where we learn from each other in this process. So we're going to start our first simulation, which is going to be a reading simulation. So I'm going to pop up something on the screen. You guys, I'm going to give you about a minute to read through what's on the screen. We'll go to the second screen. We'll read through that. And then I just want to ask you some basic comprehension questions. And I want you to be thinking about maybe some of the tools you used as you were comprehending this. You know, we give our students a lot of reading strategies. So did you use any reading strategies along the way? And then also just the level of ease or difficulty that you found. So we are going to begin with the first one. And for this reading simulation, you are going to be reading about sleep and learning. So I'm going to give you about a minute. I'm going to set my timer, and then I will move forward to the next screen. So we'll finish the second half of this passage about sleep and learning. So you guys can go ahead and begin. Okay, I'm going to stop you there. We're going to go to the next screen. And we're going to finish reading about sleep and learning. I'm going to give you another minute, and then we'll talk about some of your insight reading these passages. Okay, we're going to stop there. And I just want to go into a little bit of a reflection. So what was that passage about? I want to know, what was that passage about, and did you find it difficult to read? Why or why not? Please go ahead and type into the chat box. Good. Yep, absolutely. The passage was about why sleep was important. Was it a difficult passage to read for you? Did anybody struggle through that? Okay, so some of us had to reread it several times. Fantastic. Yeah, so I did give you a time constraint. Oftentimes we give kids time constraints when they're reading, but you had background knowledge, and that helps so much, right? We can pull on prior information. Excellent. Okay, good. Good feedback. We're going to start a second simulation. And for this simulation, you're going to follow the instructions on the screen. So for this simulation, in the first two paragraphs, an I can be an I or an E, and a P can be a P or a T. So I'm going to give you the same amount of time. I'm going to ask you to read through these two paragraphs. At the minute, we'll go on to the next screen and read a little bit more, and then we'll talk about this experience instead. And again, I'll be asking you comprehension questions as well. Okay, our time is up. We are going to move forward to the rest of this passage. So for the next three paragraphs, an O can be an O or an A, and an L can be an L or an R. And so I'm going to have you do the same thing. I want you to read through this passage using that kind of key. And then after a minute, I'll stop you and we will talk about what you read. Okay, I'm going to stop you right there. And let's take a moment to talk about what we just did. So I want to know, with that second passage, 3 questions I want your answers to in the chat box. What was the passage about? What was your experience in reading that passage? And did you get as far into that passage as you did the first one? Fantastic. So for some of us that know how to decode, you got through it easier. Great feedback. What else? How was your comprehension? Could you comprehend as much in that passage as you could in the previous one? Great feedback. It was harder to comprehend. I gave up early, and it was hurting my eyes. Absolutely. Yeah, so we put forth a lot of effort and got stuck. Yes, absolutely. So obviously, when a dyslexic reads, they don't, see a P for a T, but dyslexics struggle with decoding. So they have to work really, really hard to decode. So when you give them a passage that's full of words, they work extra hard to decode those words. And because they work extra hard, oftentimes they need more time on assignment to be able to decode. We also know that when a person is working really hard to decode, their comprehension level goes down. And that's a struggle we see with a lot of dyslexics oftentimes. And then somebody said, my eyes hurt. And that is so true. Oftentimes when you are working with dyslexic, you'll see them like kind of straining or doing this with their hands, or they'll use a tracker on a page because not only is it hard to read and it's a strain on their eyes because they're decoding, but also for oftentimes dyslexics see words differently on the page. So sometimes the words can show up in waves. Sometimes they can look like they're kind of falling down the page. Oftentimes dyslexics struggle with not skipping over a word. So they'll read the first word and then skip to the next one and skip to the next one. I just want you to take a moment and think about what it's like for a kiddo to sit in a classroom and watch everybody around them be given a piece of paper and fly through it, and for them to be stuck at the beginning. The struggle with decoding is a real thing. Okay, we're going to go on to writing simulation. So you all need a piece of paper and a pencil, please. And I am going to dictate some sentences to you, and you're going to write them down. Okay, pretty straightforward. However, for this simulation, you'll be writing with your non-dominant hand. So if you are right-handed, you'll be writing with your left hand. And if you are left-handed, you'll be writing with your right hand. And you are not allowed to go back and erase. I want you to just keep moving forward. Okay? So I have 4 sentences I'm going to give you. The first one is, Ben went to the store for milk. The second one is, Peter studied for his science test. The third one is, Jim asked, where is my pencil? And the fourth one is, given a list of 1 or 2 syllable second grade words containing short vowels, Debbie will, without prompting, be able to decode those words with 95% accuracy. So, how'd that go for you? Where did you get stuck? What were you frustrated with? And what could I have done differently for you to make it easier? Absolutely. Our words came out backwards and you needed me to repeat. Good. What else? How did you feel about me as I was reading the sentences out loud to you? Okay, you were frustrated. Good. Somebody said you needed me to repeat. That is absolutely something I could have done to make it easier for you. I moved on before you were ready or finished. Mm-hmm. Good. I should have slowed down and I should have given you a visual. Absolutely. So oftentimes what happens with dyslexics is they know what they want to say, but getting it from their brain out onto the piece of paper is where the delay happens. And they need an extra few seconds to be able to write down what they think and get it actually on paper. Okay? This also is part of the auditory processing we were talking about. Oftentimes dyslexics need a few extra seconds to let it kind of sink in, or they need to hear it again in order for it to really sink in. So it's something to be aware of. Oftentimes these are the kids that say, what? And you're going, I've already told you 3 times. But they just need that extra time to let it sink in and for them, the words to either get down on the paper, or if you call on them in class or you call them out on something and you've given them a question, they need to hear that question again, or they need a couple extra seconds to think through something before they're ready to respond, because their brain is organizing the information and working to get it back out. Okay, we're going to do a second writing simulation. However, for this one, you can use your dominant hand. I will not take that from you for this one. So for this one, I want you to write me just one paragraph about what you did yesterday. Okay, I'm going to give you 2 minutes, and I just want you to write me a paragraph about what you did yesterday. Okay, I'm going to set my timer, and you guys can begin. Okay, that is time. So what I want to know from you in the chat box is, what did you choose to, how did you choose what to write about? Okay, how did you decide what you were going to write about? Was it difficult to write? And did you have to think a lot about grammar and spelling? Those are kind of the questions I have for you. So how did you decide what to write about? Was it difficult? And then did you have to think a lot about grammar and spelling as you were working through that? Excellent. So first, next, then last, you put in chronological order. Makes total sense. Cursive was easier for you, and you were under a time limit. That makes sense to me. Did anybody find this as a difficult assignment to do? A difficult task? Good. Quick summary, no hurdles, not too difficult. Excellent. Good. So didn't have to worry about grammar or spelling. It just kind of flowed out of you. That's what I want to hear. By now, you know there's going to be a twist. So I'm going to have you do the same thing. But this time, you're going to write a paragraph about what you did this morning. Okay, so today. And these are the rules you have to follow. You cannot use the following words: A and B, for, have, in, of, that, the, to, and. While you're spelling the words, for every T, you must use the letter B. For every A, you must use the letter O. You are not allowed to go back and cross them out and erase and respell them. Okay? You just have to write it out as it comes out. So I'm going to give you the same amount of time. You're going to have 2 minutes, and I want you to write a paragraph about what you did this morning following these rules instead. You already gave up, huh? You're not allowed to give up. Keep going. If I'm a teacher in the classroom, I'm telling you, you're not allowed to get up. Keep going. We've got a whole thing to do. Okay? You just try harder. I'm sure you can do it. Nope. It's so easy. You just told me how easy it was. It shouldn't be hard. Okay, time's up. How'd that go, guys? Overwhelming. What were some of the, so this time I'm going to ask you the same questions. How did you decide what to write about? Was it easy or hard? And did you have to think a lot about spelling and grammar? I want to know kind of your experience with that. That is so powerful. I told myself I can't. Good. It got so hard, you just gave up. What else? If you handed me this assignment, would this be a true reflection of your intelligence? Of course not. How would you feel if I asked you to take this assignment and give it to somebody next to you to edit for you? Are you proud of this work? Yeah. So oftentimes, dyslexics struggle with spelling. Okay, so this was, how did this impact your word choice? That's what I want to know. Did you use all the words you wanted to use when you guys are writing? I ended up using simpler words. Bingo. Absolutely. So oftentimes a dyslexic might, as a parent, right, from a parental end or from a teacher end, a dyslexic might sit down with me, a kiddo might sit down with me and say, Miss Sigander, I have a great idea for a story and I want to get this to happen, and this to happen, and this to happen, and I want to tell about my great adventure to the Grand Canyon, okay? And they have really great ideas. And then you get their piece of writing in front of them. And rather than them saying, I went to the Grand Canyon, it was a great adventure, it was so fun, what we see on the page they turned in was, it was big. Okay? And it's because they knew how to spell those words. and they didn't want to look dumb, and they didn't want to look foolish. And so they changed their word choice to get something on the page, even though it's not a great reflection of their ability to write, their vocabulary, their sentence fluency. So some of the things that I really encourage families to do, teachers to do, is to use speech to text. It's such a great tool to kick off kids in general with, but especially kids with dyslexia, because it allows them to get all of those words out and all of those big vibrant words and colors and things that they're seeing and how they want to sound out on a piece of paper. And then they can go through and begin to edit it for grammar, change sentence structure, all of that kind of stuff. But it ensures that they have a jumping off point that is better than it is big. Questions or thoughts around kind of that process? Anything before we move on? It's called, I have it somewhere. I think it's called Read to Me. It's a Google Chrome add-on, and it will actually, you can highlight the text and it'll read out loud to you. Phenomenal. I highly suggest it for dyslexics. There are several speech-to-text Google Chrome add-ons that are free that you can use as well. And then there's a really great one called Beeline Reader, B-L-I-N-E Reader, and it actually changes the color of the font on a computer. When we talked earlier about your eyes kind of getting tired and you straining, oftentimes the black and white juxtaposition on the screen is actually really hard for dyslexics to read. And so if you add on Beeline Reader to your computer, it will change the color of the font anytime they go to a website or when they're writing, and that makes it easier for them to write sometimes and to read as well. It's a good question. Great question. So for distance learning, she's noticed people using online text. There is actually a dyslexic font, and it is so much easier for dyslexics to read. It is free. You can type in dyslexic font, and you can download it for free. There are books that are written in dyslexic font. There's entire book series that are written in dyslexic font for kiddos. But if you download the dyslexic font, it will actually change all the font on your computer. So for my daughter, every time she goes to a website or types, everything is changed into the dyslexia font for her. And you can do that through Beeline Reader as well, which is really helpful. And it just makes the letters look a little bit more different, right? So the D bends a little bit more one way and the B bends a little bit more the other way. And it's easier for their brains to distinguish the differences between all of the letters. Okay. I've got one more simulation from you, and then we'll do a question and answer time, and I can hopefully answer any questions that you have. But this is a great one, especially for older kids, right? We often think about dyslexia in younger kids as they're learning to read, but it is just as prevalent in the high school level. And one of the things that dyslexic often struggles with is copying notes from the board onto the piece of paper. So that those issues with their eyes and the eye tracking, it is hard to go up and then down, up and then down. It is also really hard to copy from a rough draft to a final copy. Oftentimes they'll get lost as they go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. But this one is geared more towards secondary students and college-age students who have to take in a lot of learning auditorily. Okay, so you guys are going to be given a quiz. So I'm going to give you some information. At the end of this, you're going to be given a quiz. You are welcome to take notes as I'm speaking, but you will be graded on this at the end. So I'm going to just go through a presentation on dyslexia and what dyslexia is. And I would love for you guys to take some notes and we'll talk about it at the end. Dyslexia. What is the definition of dyslexia? The dys part of dyslexia means lack of ability. The lexia part means language. So the simplest definition of lack of ability is language. Before we look at the formal definition of dyslexia, it's important to know that dyslexia is not caused by poor eyesight, seeing words or letters backwards, a developmental display, acquired by dyslexia, asphasia, a degenerative disease, lack of educational opportunity, result of lack of effort or laziness on the part of the student. The following is definition. Breaking down the definition, it means a specific learning disability that is a neurobiological in origin. It is characterized by difficulties with accurate or fluent word recognition and poor spelling and decoding abilities. These difficulties typically result from deficits in the phonological component of the language that is often expected in relation to cognitive abilities is the provision of effective classroom instruction. Difficulty with decoding can lead to difficulty in comprehension. It can also lead to the student limiting how much they read, which may limit their ability to build background knowledge in many areas. They may impact the growing of vocabularies. However, many individuals with dyslexia can find alternative ways to build their vocabulary and background. Secondary consequences may include problems in reading comprehension and background knowledge. Plasticity, the ability for the brain to make new connections for learning. This happens over a lifelong span. It takes long as we age. Repetition. Everyone needs repetition to learn new information. Think of the brain's ability to build effective connections for learning and muscle learning. You can't go to the gym one day and have a new muscle. You have to do lots of practice, repetition of specific exercises to build good muscles. The same is true for neural connections. Brain noting is made possible to see the areas of the brain. MRI is most commonly used. Images allow us to see the brain of dyslexia. Through this technology, researchers have been able to determine that individuals with dyslexia are using different areas of the brain to try to process reading tasks about individuals without dyslexia. Individuals with dyslexia are primarily relying on the area of their frontal lobe and overrides using the right side of their brain as compared to individuals without dyslexia. This research has been peer-reviewed and repeated in multiple studies, providing scientific evidence that dyslexia is neurobiological. Dyslexia can be heritable, and it's common to have more than one family member because dyslexia occurs on a continuum. It is also common for one family member to have mild symptoms and the other exhibit more severe symptoms. Once a student reaches the fourth grade, then they are reading to learn. And the explicit teaching of reading is much less common. Those with dyslexia who are not remediated before fourth grade are at greater risk for remaining poor readers. There are several symptoms for dyslexia. Each symptom is in the spectrum of mild, moderate, severe. Each individual will have more than one symptom, but may not have all the symptoms, and each symptom can be a different degree of severity, from mild to profound. This is why two individuals with dyslexia will not look exactly the same in their challenges, strengths, and performances. Symptoms such as difficulty learning to read, difficulty learning to spell, phonological awareness, difficulty identifying, generating rhyming words or counting syllables, phonemic awareness, difficulty with learning and manipulating sounds and words, auditory discrimination, difficulty distinguishing different sounds in words. Symptoms continued, misreads or omits common small words, as stumbles through long words, poor reading comprehension, slow laborious reading, difficulty in learning sounds, letters, difficulty remembering names and shapes of letters, reverse letters in order, difficult with rapid naming tasks, difficult recognizing names or patterns. A person with dyslexia needs more time to process written information, sometimes spoken information, because our culture expects answers immediately after being asked. Many students will blurt out the first thing that comes to mind. If they're given more time to process the questions, their answers to something better and appropriate. Research says that accommodations modifications help. Accommodation are tools to assist the student. Modifications make changes in curriculum. Remediation, direct, explicit instruction. For remediation, we need to teach phonemic awareness, phonological awareness, phonics rules. We need to use phonics-based programs. The instructors must follow the program step by step, allow time for processing, provide repetition, drop the when teaching phonemic awareness. After proper remediation, brain imaging shows changes in organization and neural pathways. Many studies have identified areas of the brain that are involved in the reading process. These studies are also able to illustrate those with dyslexia have a glitch in the neural networks of their brain that enable a person to read. These studies are also illustrated that after proper remediation, the neural glitch begins to resemble the network of students with dyslexia. I'm going to stop there. You all ready for your quiz? I'm sure you got all of that just fine. Wasn't a problem at all. Here's your quiz. I'd like you to write down on that piece of paper and answer these 10 questions. I'm going to give you about 3 minutes to do it. I am not able to answer a single question. My brain was immediately overwhelmed and shut down. What a powerful response. Yeah. Your brain. I was speaking fast. Not another language, but I was speaking fast. Okay, I'm going to stop you there. How'd that go? How'd you guys do on your quiz? That's such a great response. I found that when I stopped taking notes and just listened, I got some of the material. This goes back again to the auditory processing, right? And sometimes that struggle to write and to get the words out, sometimes our dyslexic kids are working so hard to write the notes down that they can't even listen to what you're saying, okay? So one of the things that I really encourage, if at all possible, is to print out notes and give them ahead of time to your kids, to your dyslexic kids. You would have had a much easier time following along if you had some notes already in front of you. And you could add some notes here or there. You could add some questions or some comments. Obviously, I was speaking so fast, not in a great way for teaching. But I want you to get the idea of what it feels like for a dyslexic to have an onslaught of information thrown at them and ask them to get the information, take notes, and take a quiz, okay? They need to hear it again. They need to see it. There should be pictures. Oftentimes, you could easily, if you're taking notes on a board, you could have an older student grab their phone and take pictures of the notes so that they're not working so hard to write the notes, but they still have them so they can be present and listen to you speaking. You can print out the notes ahead of time and give it to them. It's the really simple things that are actually really great things for all learners, for all students that might need extra help, that we can easily do. So I want to know from you, what have you learned from this experience about being dyslexic? What are you going to take away? What was surprising to you? I want to know what you thought. Yeah, Mary, that's a great question. So you and I can connect afterwards. So I oftentimes do this in a couple different forms. So usually it's in person. Thanks to COVID, I do it online now. But I work with teachers. I do this all the time with teachers, and it's such a great experience for them to sit. In fact, I had one teacher that said to me, "Oh my gosh, this was so stressful, and I get to walk away. I don't live with this every day. I can't imagine what it's like for my kiddos to walk into my class every day." So oftentimes, it's a great thing to use with teachers. It's a great thing for parents who are struggling with dyslexia, struggling to understand. I do this with a lot of parents who will often say, "I feel so bad because I just thought they weren't trying." Or I didn't get it. I didn't know why the reading was hard. The words are there. Why can't they not just figure it out? And then I also do it with kids because it is a great tool for helping kids have empathy for other kids that are different than them. And so, yeah, you absolutely can. Let's connect and I can give you more information. This version of what I did is smaller than what I normally do. And usually, like if we're doing it online, usually I'll have 20 or 30 people in Zoom. We'll go back and forth. And there's a few other exercises I add in where you have to read out loud. And that's really hard and really scary. And it's a great example for paraeducators or teachers to realize what it's like for a kid to be called on when they're a struggling reader. But yes, I think it's so important to educate. Okay, what else? Other thoughts from this experience or things you've learned about yourself or dyslexics? I love that. I better understand my son's struggles. More importantly, I know how to advocate. Isn't that the truth? When we understand what they're seeing every day. I mean, for my daughter, she said to me, Mom, the words are moving on the page. And I said, what? I can't even imagine what it looks like to have the words moving on the page. And so until I understood what her struggle was, I didn't know how to help her. Okay, so just a few things I want to throw at you of things you can do. We've talked, first of all, about just really easy things. Google Chrome add-ons you can do, giving notes in the classroom, giving extra time. I always want to say that when you have a dyslexic in your classroom, oftentimes we as teachers will call on a student to read out loud or pull a popsicle stick to have them read out loud. If you are going to pull a popsicle stick, will you just put your dyslexics in a separate bin of popsicle sticks and put them in the middle and let them know, hey, when it comes to reading, I'm never going to call on you unless you raise your hand. Because that anxiety of them sitting there being afraid that you're going to call on them turns off their brain. We know what anxiety does to us in the classroom. It turns off our brain. And so that's an easy way you can do it. Not just for reading, but even for math, right? Calling on a kid to read a word problem out loud on math, if that kid is going to freeze and not struggle with reading, let alone the math. I think another thing that is to be aware of is we called them in our house Sunday night meltdowns. So the stress of going to school every day and feeling dumb and feeling different and being afraid that a kid was going to make fun of you because you spelled something on your poster wrong, or because that you were the last one. I'm always the last one to finish every test, Mom. It takes me the very longest. And we had Sunday night meltdowns, and I had a daughter who would come home from school every day and have held it together so long at school and come undone when they got home. And so from a teacher perspective, I just want you to know that there is a lot of emotions and a lot of shame that these kids are walking around with, where they think that something is wrong with them. And we talk a lot about there's nothing wrong with you. Every brain has a map, and yours is just different. And so that means that for some kids to get from point A to point B, they just go straight from point A to point B. And you go from A to C to D to B. And that takes a little longer. But it also means that other routes on your map go much faster. And so giving kids an understanding, but being sensitive to what they're facing and to how much they're struggling to pull it together when they're in your classroom, I think is just a super important thing. And then there's just a lot of resources. There's so much research about what we can do in our classrooms that are going to help all learners. They're going to really help our dyslexics, but actually research says they help all of our learners learn better. So if you guys have more questions, more concerns, be aware of them in the classroom, support your families, educate your families. I get families all the time that call me that go, I don't even know. What is a 504? What is an accommodation? How do I get them diagnosed? I mean, there's just no knowledge, and there's so much fear. Technology, I talked about all these Beeline Reader, Read to Me, speech to text, audiobooks. Let those kids have audiobooks. Audiobooks are the first thing I say to a family of a kiddo with dyslexia, because their kids get to read the books their friends are reading. And we talk about, there's two ways to read. We can read with our ears and we can read with our eyes. And it's great to do both. We've got to read with our eyes, but it's great to read with our ears. And when they're reading with their ears, their sentence fluency is improving. Their vocabulary is improving. Their confidence is improving. They get to engage in conversations that they desperately want to engage in. And I don't just mean have them listen to a book and read along with it. I mean, just let them listen to a book. They're free. They can go to the library. They can download them on their iPads. They're everywhere. We really want to encourage that. And then again, simulations. I think this is one of the most important ways that we can get education out, is just by giving people a glance. So if you want more information about simulations, please feel free to reach out to me. I do them for free. I just believe in them. I think education is important. So I'm happy to give you the tools to do it in your area, but I'm also happy to do it for you. I've been trained in this simulation, and I just think it's super powerful. So that is all I have for you today. If you have questions, I'll stick around and answer them, but thank you for taking the time to catch a glimpse, have an idea of what our dyslexic kids face every day. It's 1 in 5 kids, so they are everywhere. It's 1 in 5 adults. So if you are an admin, it's some of your teachers. And if you work in an office, it's some of the people you work with. And so realizing it's not just a kiddo thing. I am work with so many adults who say, my boss doesn't get it. It's really hard and I need help, but I feel too stupid to say anything. It doesn't go away. So let's accommodate and support these people the best that we can. Oh, thank you. Thank you for coming. It's been a pleasure to be here. I really appreciate the opportunity.